Hey guys, let's talk about tonight's episode of Rain. And I did again enjoy this episode. And I have to say, every scene that Mary and Catherine are in is sheer perfection. I mean, the two of them dueling with one another is amazing to watch. And pretty much all the women on this show at this point are pretty badass, and I like it. It's a good sight to see. When Mary goes down to see Catherine after an attempt has been made on Bash's life, she sees the type of living situations Catherine has given herself, which is a lap of luxury. And she's pretty much a prisoner at this point. And she comes into the room and she's like, I thought there was only supposed to be guards and maid service that was to come into this room as per Henry's orders. And Catherine has decked out the entire place. She's eating like a dessert with strawberries on it. She's got women bringing her food and dresses, and there's like drapes everywhere, and like, oh, she's living in the lap of luxury. And Mary is like, I don't think so. And she's basically point blank asks her if she had anything to do with the attempt made on Bash's life. And of course, Catherine is like, you have no proof. I have not done anything. And anybody who was smart and loves their country would want to take Bash out. And of course, the two of them are equal in their disdain for one another and stand up to one another in just, it's a great sight to see. And of course, Mary, knowing that she has way more power at this point than Catherine does, pretty much orders everybody in the room to remove everything in the room and have Catherine left with absolutely nothing. She asks that all the food, all the wine, everything, the drapes, everything be taken away. And of course, Catherine's got this look on her face like, how dare you? And Mary's just like, check and mate. So it was just, and this was like the opening, like one of the opening scenes. So it was really good. But most of this episode was about Bash and Catherine really trying to work on the same page. And what we found out in this episode was his cousin, Isabel, who was pregnant. Her father was murdered years ago because he was seen as a traitor. And if it was found out that Bash's half uncle was a traitor, then there's no way that he would be able to become king. And so this secret had to be, you know, like nobody can find out this secret. And so they have to try to get her out of the country, out of the castle, and get her away from pretty much Catherine's guards and everything, so that she can deliver this baby and she can be free of what could happen from Catherine. And of course, Catherine is always scheming, and her plan was to have Bash and her killed somewhere in the woods, of course. And we all know that Catherine has a lot of hot air that comes out of her mouth. I mean, she's brilliant with her plans, but not so good in the execution. And she had one of her, her minions, Hugo, trying to execute this plan for her, and it just wasn't going to work. So, of course, Mary, because let's face it, Mary is another woman who will stand up and she will call it like it is. And she's pretty much telling Bash, like, you have to get your cousin out of here. You cannot be seen with her. So that means I'm going to leave with her, and you're going to leave in another carriage. And this is what's going to happen. And we're going to meet there. And da da da. It's like she just comes up with plans after plans, and they always end up working. But what they didn't expect was that they were going to be stuck in the Bloodwoods. And when this happens, they set up a tent and everything. And of course, one of the good things I like about this show is that a lot of the secrets don't remain secrets for very long. And we all know that back connection to the pagans, and that he knows how to chant in pagan, and who was going to find this out. And so, of course, in this episode, Mary finds this out because the pagans come, and it looks like, they're about to attack the tent that they're in. But Bash had put this necklace on the outside, letting them know that pagans were in the tent so that they wouldn't harm them. And instead, they harmed the horse. And of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, but Bash, his cousin Isabel, and their other friend that he was with started doing this chant. And that was sort of like a way for the other pagans to hear that there were pagans in the tent, or pretend that they were pagans in the tent so that they wouldn't harm them. And of course, Mary finds this out, and she is not impressed. And she is starting to put the pieces to the puzzle together, and she realizes that this is what he's been hiding all this time. And she wants to really understand what this all means, and he's trying to explain to her that he's not a pagan, he's a Catholic just like she is and just like his mother is. But this is sort of just this chant that they were saying. This is like almost like a nursery rhyme that he's learned from when he was a child. He doesn't even really know what it means, but like they just believe in something different, and the people that were coming to harm them are pagans that are sort of believe in a different type of God, and so they're like a more corrupt pagans, I guess. I don't know. But what it really meant was it kind of brought Mary and Bash closer together, because now she knows the secret about him, and it just, he opened up to her, so it's kind of obviously gives them a little bit of a better bond. And so while they're in the Bloodwoods, Isabel gives birth to the baby, and it's a girl, and unfortunately Isabel dies after giving birth. So they hand this baby off to, I don't know, some woman who I guess kind of has like an orphanage kind of place. And so they say, you cannot tell anybody about this baby, where you found it, just say that it showed up on the castle doors, and that's that. So the baby is okay, and now it's being raised by some people. I don't really know who, because they didn't really explain who they were. But what we do know is, Mary basically said to Bash, listen, I don't want to take the choice away from you. If you don't want to be king, if you don't want all these responsibilities, then, just say so, because all this is happening because, we don't want Francis to die. And obviously Henry wants to rule England. My mother wants me to be the queen so that I can, be the queen of England as well. So all these other people want this to happen, but, obviously Bash has to then become king if anything is to happen to King Henry. And even in the beginning, when he's sitting there and he's listening to all the quarrels that the people are coming to him with, he's kind of sitting on this chair like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, he's bored and he just doesn't want to hear all these complaints, and he doesn't want to have to like give a ruling and everything. So, it'll be interesting to see how he moves forwards when it really comes time to do the hard decisions. Another scene that I really enjoyed was when Mary's ladies in waiting were guarding Catherine. And, they were basically tasked with trying to find proof that she had something to do with Bash and the assassination attempt. And it was really awesome to see these women stick together and just call Catherine out. And, Catherine is wicked in all of her ways, and she was trying to taunt them and, say all these cruel things to them, but they weren't backing down. And when Lola came into the room at the end, and she had these two envelopes, and she basically said, we forged your handwriting, which says that you tried to kill Bash, and we are going to use this as leverage if anything ever happens to Mary or Bash or any of the other ladies. And so it was just kind of one of those scenes where you're just like, it's awesome to see people standing up, one, for themselves, and two, putting Catherine in her place. And Catherine is somebody who will always fight to the death. And I even loved it when Lola said, you're doing all of this for your son, and he's abandoned you. You're doing all this for Francis, and he's left you. He doesn't want anything to do with you. So I just love that it was another just dig at her. It's like, who are you doing all of this for? And at the end of the day, it's survival of the fittest for Catherine, and she's pretty much like in the worst position ever. And she's losing allies left, right, and center. So, I don't count her out at all, because she is a fighter and she will land on her 2 feet at the end of the day. But it's nice to see just how powerful these women are and how much they are willing to stand up to one another and fight for what they believe is right. So that's kind of cool too. And then, of course, we had the end scene when they go to bury Isabel. And, yeah, I mean, sorry, people. All these people just be slicing up their wrists and their hands and blood dripping everywhere. And I'm like, ouch, like, it's just ridiculous. But, Bash and Mary both slit their their hand and poured the blood on the gravesite, which I guess is like a ritual in of the pagans that they like to do. And, he basically looked to Mary and said, I'm not doing this so that I can become king and be the ruler of these three nations. I'm doing this because when I become your husband, I'm doing this for you and I'm going to be loyal to you and I'm going to do everything, to be, I guess, a good husband, whatever. And they have their kiss. And it's not their first kiss, but it was a kiss that definitely meant something. And you could tell that the way that this episode had been going forward, that this was a kiss that was definitely going to come. And that's pretty much how the episode ended. And Francis was not in this episode. And I mean, I definitely enjoy the chemistry between Francis and Mary. So now that Bash is in the picture and he's about to become her husband, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Francis when all this moves forwards. But another good episode, not as I think as impactful as last week's episode, but I still think that there were a lot of interesting points that happened in this episode, and we'll see what happens when Henry comes back with, I guess, hopefully the news that he can legitimize Bash and he will become the rightful heir and become king once King Henry is dead. All right, guys, that has been my review for Reign. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of the episode. Leave a comment, like, and subscribe, as I say every week, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye, guys.